Everyone, this is something really important, and I don't think I've ever had anybody talk about this before. I'm very aware of guardianship, but I really didn't understand that there's some very serious, abusive things going on. So we have an expert, Dr. Sam Sugar, who not only is an expert, but he also is personally involved. So welcome to our show, Dr. Sugar.
Thank you very much for having me.
I know that you are a doctor of internal medicine, and of course, as a physician, this is probably something that you weren't aware of until this happened to you personally.
Absolutely true. In fact, it's almost impossible for anyone to understand how egregious all of this is unless they've had the misfortune to experience it personally.
Now, when you talk about that, maybe you ought to let's first talk about what a guardianship is, what it entails, and then you can talk about how it affected you personally.
Terrific. Well, most people think that when they make their end-of-life plans, and that's really what we're talking about, stuff that happens to seniors as they age in place, when they make those plans and they pay a lawyer, sometimes a lot of money, to create their end-of-life decisions or what's called pre-needs documents, which includes a will, the nomination of a power of attorney for health care, the nomination of a durable power of attorney for financial matters, they think that they've done everything right, and generally speaking, they have. Certainly, the family member in question, in our case, spent a great deal of money to create those plans. But like so many other situations that we see, family squabbles over power, over money, over affection occasionally get out of hand, and that's when the trouble starts. A disgruntled family member, or frankly, it doesn't even have to be a family member, any stranger can go after someone that's been targeted as a likely candidate for this type of abuse, this racket that actually goes on all over the country, but especially in Florida. And what happens next is a lawyer is hired, goes before a judge and says, "Oh, Mr. Judge, this poor lady or woman is being abused, is being murdered, is being exploited, is being poisoned." There's this whole playbook of allegations that never, ever have to be proven at all. It's just one lawyer saying a whole bunch of stuff that he knows he'll never have to prove. The judge has no choice, really, although we have some criticisms of the judges. The judge says, well, it's our responsibility to protect people like that, and so I am instituting something called an emergency temporary guardianship. And once that happens, the individual in question, who has done nothing more than age in the state of Florida in this case, loses all of their civil rights, has less civil rights than a convicted serial murderer, and is turned from an individual with rights and protections of the Constitution into a thing, an object, a chattel, which is now the possession and owned by a total stranger called a guardian. These guardians are not licensed. They don't have any special education, and the only thing they've ever had to do to become a guardian, and we're not talking about all guardians here, we're talking about for-profit guardians who do this to make a great deal of money. The only thing they need to become a guardian is to take an internet course and pay a few $100s, at which point they're eligible to be handed over multi-million-dollar estates and do with them as they please. Once that cookie jar is opened, it's no surprise that everybody wants to put their hand in it, and we have seen cases for multi-million dollars in legal fees, guardians' fees, accountants' fees, you name it, as well as money going to the downstream stakeholders like used car salesmen, real estate agents, pharmacies, nursing homes, doctors, hospitals. It's open season on the account of these harmless but helpless elders who have saved their whole life, been positive, wonderful citizens, and have now become the property of someone else. And the money part is bad enough, but what happens to most of these people is that in order to keep them and their families from complaining about this obvious, ridiculous, outrageous situation, the older folks are chemically restrained with lethal doses of antipsychotic medications that turn them into babbling vegetables within just a couple of days. And the family who protests it is harassed and subject to legal abuse. And in just a few sentences, that's the nightmare that the victims of abusive guardianship must live.
Well, I have some questions now. That was quite a paragraph in a discussion. No, really, I think that was very good. And I now have discussion, even though I'm a gerontologist and I'm aware of what a guardianship is supposed to be. I'm curious, if someone is even put into guardianship, does that mean that they don't have relatives, or they don't have, how does that even happen?
Well, the reason it happens, and the best way to describe this is to describe the discrepancy about what happens to poor people in guardianship and what happens to people who have assets when they fall into this abyss. When a poor person needs the help of the court to become a ward of the state, there's none of this litigation, there's no money at stake, and the system works really well. The statewide guardianship program provides not-for-profit guardians who take care of these poor people who might be on the street or may become bankrupt or who have no one else to take care of them. And the state does a good job. We're not complaining about that. But what happens to individuals who do have assets is that they get trapped in this legal morass that does not do what the law intends. The law, to be specific, the law says guardianship should be utilized only as a last-ditch effort to promote the well-being of the disabled person and protect them from neglect, exploitation, or abuse, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What happens in these cases is that the law is turned on its head, and instead of protecting the ward, they rape the ward's body and assets. And at the end of this whole process, if the ward is still alive, when the money's gone, the guardian's gone, the lawyer's gone, and they wind up on our tax rolls in Medicaid nursing homes. It's really a very incredible situation.
So the way that I'm getting this is that person who becomes affected, really, even though we're affecting that person's life, his, her life, and the families, they are sitting on the outside. Can't they go to the judge and get their own lawyer to tell the facts?
Well, you would think so. You really would think so, because based on our belief in our government and on the Constitution, we all have rights. But our experience in probate courts across the state of Florida, and in the United States at large, but we're focusing on Florida, our experience is that probate courts, because the judge in the probate court appoints these for-profit guardians and seems to know them and relate well to them, they are not disposed to taking complaints or issues regarding their performance. All of us in this mess have spent enormous amounts of money to try to rescue our loved ones out of this morass. But in certain court districts in this state, that just simply can't happen because the judges are not disposed to even listen to us. Our cases are not even accepted. Our complaints are rejected. Our motions aren't listened to. And what's worse is, all of this starts with a lie. All of it starts with a lie that somehow or another, unless the court takes immediate action, horrible things will happen to the ward. In my own case that I'm so familiar with, that was a ridiculous lie. Lies like the alleged incapacitated person is being poisoned are used all the time. And the trouble with all that is they're never held to accountability. There are never hearings on those lies. And the rush to guardianship, which is what we describe on our website, the rush to guardianship never is slowed down. It's a very fast-moving freight train, and there's so much money involved for the guardians and the people who protect them that it's almost impossible to get any traction in the court. We have been trying for the last 2 years to get traction with the legislature, and we are making some progress in that respect. But our purpose, the purpose of Americans Against Abusive Probate Guardianship, is to educate, advocate, and legislate. And our talk today, I hope, will help educate your listeners to the real concern they should have if this should happen to them.
Well, I am so happy that you're doing this, and I want to give some information. People can actually go, let me give you a phone number that you can call. Get your pencils out. Remember, I always talk about our shows being Pencil Talk Radio because you have so many excellent speakers who are giving you a very important information, and you're never going to remember it. You've got to write it down. I always ask you, get yourself a notebook and keep it by your bed, and when you listen to our radio shows, write down the number. So this is important. It's 855-913-5337. Again, 855-913-5337 or 855-91-ELDER. 855-91-ELDER. Now, what really amazes me, though, is of all people, I mean, you're a physician. It's one thing if you're dealing with family members who are uneducated and they could be, not really very smart about what's happening or taking advantage of someone. But here, you're a physician. And how did you first find out that, and this is your mother or mother-in-law? I forgot.
Mother-in-law.
And how did you first find out, that anything was even happening?
Well, that's part of the problem. We found out by a very alarming phone call from her to us saying some guy just knocked at the door, told me he was sent here by the court, and I have to be in court in 2 days because they want to declare me incapacitated.
Huh. Okay, but so back up. Who was responsible for that?
Family members who disagreed with her decisions.
I see.
I don't want to go into the specifics.
Okay, so...
And let me tell you why. We're now 5 years into litigation on this. This is a multi-million-dollar litigation, not for what anyone can recover. I'm talking about legal fees of multi-million dollars. We are now in our second appeal, and we have had to spend a fortune out of our own pockets because of what happens to anyone who tries to get in the way of this freight train. We are abused, we are exploited, we are issued what's called stay-away orders. For example, we have many, many cases in Florida, including my own, where because we disagreed with the guardian and the way they were handling things and asked for their removal, we were retaliated against. And it's not just us, it's practically every case in our group, retaliated against with something called a stay-away order, where in retaliation for objecting to what's happening, the guardian asks the court to restrain us from even being in the same zip code, literally, as our loved one. It isolates us and the loved one and allows them to get away with, as the phrase goes, murder.
All right, but wait a minute. Why couldn't you have brought your mother-in-law to the court when you went?
We're not allowed to do that. Once the alleged incapacitated person is put into a guardianship, we are not allowed to do anything with them, for them, or about them. They are not people anymore. They are property. And just like I could not take someone's car to the court, I couldn't take her to the court.
Okay.
It's a very difficult
this is so preposterous, it's hard to believe. So my question is, but if your mother-in-law got up, went, and she obviously couldn't get in a car and drive herself, but got a cab and went on her own, how about that?
Wouldn't work. They wouldn't let her. My mother-in-law was kept prisoner in her apartment for months and months and months. She was not allowed to leave her apartment to play bingo or to go shopping or to even speak with her neighbors. And it's not just our case. It's many, in fact, most of the cases where the alleged incapacitated person who was supposed to be protected from this kind of stuff actually gets enormous abuse and isolation because they become a piece of property. They are no longer people. I know that's a very hard thing to understand.
This is tough. Dr. Sugar, I have to tell you, I'm becoming very creative, and I'm thinking, I've been asked to get into guardianship because of my profession and all, but I haven't had the time and I haven't done it. And I'm thinking, because I'd be a great guardian, so I thought maybe now I should become a guardian and blow the whole thing to pieces. Because my credentials and what I do, I could become a guardian, and then I could see these things, and then go to the judges and say, "Are you understanding what's going on here?" And then, but maybe they would kill me as a guardian very shortly, right?
Well, you said it, I didn't.
Oh,
Let me tell you why that might not work.
Why?
I need to explain that.
Okay.
For example, in Miami-Dade, where I'm most familiar, there's supposed to be a wheel, WHEEL, to randomly assign guardians to cases. And our investigation over the last 2 years shows that wheel hasn't been used in a decade. 95% of the wealthy cases, I'll call them wealthy cases, go to just a handful of the 88 available guardians in Miami-Dade County. These are all the in-group. In fact, one of them called themselves a near incestuous group of colleagues. And in the same vein, the lawyers that defend them are also a very tiny group of extremely influential and wealthy individuals who, by the way, help support the re-election campaigns of the judges, which is another interesting little thing.
You just have to go to the newspapers. Have you been to the newspapers with all this and TV?
Absolutely, but it's very hard to get traction for a topic that doesn't apply, at least in their minds. What people don't realize is how many times this happens every day. Let me give you some numbers. Now, the numbers are unofficial because every guardianship is a deep, dark secret because it's a mental health issue. So no one knows how many guardianships there are in Florida. Our estimates are about 100,000. We know for a fact that the 4 judges in Miami-Dade rule and lord over 7,000 active guardianships a year. And because we know that older people die, we know that there are significant numbers of new guardianships all the time. We're guessing at this because the numbers are unavailable. The court will never release information on this. Even though the Supreme Court says that they're studying it, they did in 2003, these are just guesses. So the reason why you're
I'm so outraged right now. I'm so outraged. I can't. Well, wait a minute. But I'm a very aggressive person. And with my credentials and all the lawyers I know down, because I grew up in Miami, and circuit court judges and people in a higher level, I wouldn't let this go. I am getting so angry as we're talking.
Well, think how we feel.
I don't know how you're dealing with this.
Well, I'll tell you how we're dealing with it. There's a saying in the guardianship victimhood community that this will do one of 3 things. It'll make you broke, crazy, dead, or all 3. And we have seen deaths in our victims community. The vast majority of victims of this are indeed broke. They've spent their last dime trying to protect, and I might say unsuccessfully, trying to protect their loved ones with lawyer after lawyer after lawyer after lawyer. There are reasons why that happens. None of them are legitimate or acceptable. But the truth is, we as victims are limited in our ability to even speak out about this. Yes, we've been on local television, and there have been articles, significant front-page articles in the Sarasota Herald-Tribune, which people may want to read, by Lloyd Dunkelberger. But the press and TV in this area have not been that excited about doing this, and one can only speculate about why that is.
Well, maybe the radio show. Let's just get this radio show. We'll get it on YouTube, which is going to happen. And we just this has to happen. You see, I deal with a fantastic elder law attorney, Dr. Joe Karp, up in Palm Beach Gardens, and he was a litigator before he was an elder law attorney, but he's a board-certified elder law attorney. And, I did mention you to him the other day, and he said, it's so complicated, I can't even get involved in it. I said, I can't believe you said that. And, of course, it was just before a radio show, but I'm going to pin him down on this because he is as honest as can be. I want to hear what he has to say about this, and maybe we can get some help from him in some ways because I am furious.
Let me comment on that. Last year, we were in the legislature with a bill in the Senate and the House, and within minutes of it being introduced, it was viciously attacked by both the elder law section and the real estate, property, and trust lawyers group of the Florida Bar Association.
It was?
It was shot down before it even got to committee.
Why?
Well, self-interest by those groups.
Excuse me, why is it self-interest for a lawyer to, what? I don't understand that. There are many.
It's self-interest for the small group of attorneys who defend and protect guardians who are abusive, because the legal fees involved in that work are enormous, and they are literally handed out to just a few law firms. And the Bar Association is a trade association, let's be honest, and they're interested in protecting the income of their members. The good news is that this year our two bills, House Bill 5 and Senate Bill 318, are gaining very good traction and are moving through committees. And at least from what they've said in hearings, the real estate probate taxes, they're called reptiles.
Appropriate, right?
Yeah, have told us that they're not going to object to reform this year. We haven't heard from the elder law section. But there are very strong forces who like things just exactly the way they are.
Not if you could prove that people, the poor people, the elders have been horribly harmed. I mean, that's as bad as when children are found in homes with no food and all. What's the difference? It's still something that's not right.
Well, it isn't right, and I think anyone who's sentient would recognize that. But our problem, it turns out, as we do this longer and longer, we get very much attuned to the nuances that go on in this racket. And I'm not embarrassed to call it a racket. And the problem is responsibility for accountability of guardians. I told you that guardians are not licensed, so you can't threaten them with taking away their license. In fact, even if you prove their guardian has been self-dealing, and I've been sending evidence of self-dealing to the Office of Statewide Prosecutor for a year and a half now, nothing's happened yet. Hopefully someday it will. The only punishment that a guardian really worries about is being removed from the case. That's it. They can steal millions of dollars, arrange for their protectors to steal millions, sell houses at 5% of their, well, that's an exaggeration, at 50% of their real value, flip them to a friend for 100%, and never report those. We've reported many, many, many situations like that. Automobiles that were worth $20,000 being sold for $1,000 and flipped within minutes for a profit. I mean, if you're good at this, meaning if you're really a bad person, you can make a fortune stealing from an elderly person who has no rights and no voice and no family that's even able to stand up for them. It's a free-for-all, and once the blood is in the water, the sharks come.
But Dr. Sugar, if you have a house that's appraised at a certain amount and it's sold 50% below that or something, that's obvious. That's evidence. I can't see that someone, a judge would allow that.
Well, it's, as your friend said, it's very complicated. What happens is, in those specific cases, and it did not happen to me, but what happens is that the guardian goes in front of the judge and says, "Oh, Judge, we're running out of money and we need to sell the house for the benefit of the ward." And the judge says, "Well, okay, if you have to, you have to." And what they do is they get a phony appraisal on the house. It's real easy. A phony, fake appraisal, because there are plenty of appraisers who do this. Because there are 4 different types of appraised values. I don't want to go into that.
I'm a real estate broker. I really understand more than you can imagine, and so I'm feeling extremely upset about this, as you have. I mean, I saw your people who were at the Boomer Expo. So what can we do other than people calling you? What do you want people to do?
Well, first of all, I'd mention the website. More importantly is the phone calls, because the website really contains a lot of information and has an opportunity for people to sign up. What we really need is for people to get off their duffs and call their state senators and state representatives and their state's attorneys and the attorney general and the governor, because that's who we're dealing with now. And we're having a lot of trouble navigating the intersection of the various agencies that are supposed to be doing this work, like the Department of Children and Families and Adult Protective Services, which is in our bill. But we're finding that no one is willing to take accountability for the actions of abusive, predatory guardians in the state of Florida. So we need the legislature to step up, and they are. We have champions in the House, we have a champion in the Senate, And we really feel strongly that our bill has a very good chance of passing, both of them.
Okay, let me give the website out. It's, everyone, get your pencils out again. Remember, Pencil Talk Radio, and it's easy. It's 3 A's, AAAPG.net, stands for Americans Against Abusive Probate Guardianship, AAAPG.net. I have one very fast question. We have a couple of minutes. What would it take for me to become a guardian? Do you just have to apply and then you're just checked out with your credentials or whatever, and then you said
the mechanism to become a guardian in the state of Florida involves contacting the Department of Elder Affairs, who supervises an internet course. You pay some money to take it, not much, and then you become what's called certified. You need no special training, you need no degrees, you don't need a license, and then you will become one of the certified guardians in the state of Florida.
Okay,
it doesn't mean you'll ever get a case, though.
And what is the pay?
There is no pay.
Yes, there's pay for a guardianship.
In the not-for-profit sector, I really don't know what the pay for
I
guardians.
think, well, you know what? I'll tell you.
It's probably not much.
It's not much. I remember that because I said, well, our company, maybe we should, because at one time I heard some people needed guardians. They said, why don't you do it? And I said, it's going to take a lot of time. And then we found out it wasn't a lot. I didn't even know how to hire someone to do it. But you have stimulated me. I'm going to see what it costs. I'm going to see what happens, because I have so many people who are volunteers, who are so kind and so smart, who've retired, and I may just look into this. But I thank you very much for this, and we'll get this on YouTube so you'll be able to use it, and we'll stay in touch. I really am so glad that you called and did this with us.
Well,
Absolutely.
Thank you. And let me just say, our experience at the Boomer Expo was magnificent, fantastic, terrific. We loved it. We'll be there again next year.
Thank you. I'm so happy to have had you, and we'll be talking more. Don't go away, all right, later. I don't mean today, but another time.
Thank you so much. Good day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sugar. Bye.